Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Digging Deeper moment number 245. The purpose of our Digging Deeper moments is to take God's Word to God's world, and we're so glad that you've joined us. Do you remember the dot pictures that came out about 15 or 20 years ago? They were the rave for about a year. And if you stared at them long enough, a 3D picture would begin to emerge. Truthfully, I always had trouble seeing those pictures, but if I really stared long and hard enough, I'd eventually see them. It just took me a lot. I don't think I was smart enough to see them. That's basically what happened to me as I studied the Gospel of John, however, in Greek. As I stared at it, an image of how John arranged his Gospel began to appear to me. And that's what we've been looking at in this series. Here's the outline I've given you thus far. For those who have been watching, you'll note that I've included the prologue, John chapter 1, verses 1 through 5, in the first section. I also included the epilogue in the last section. In the first section is John chapter 1, verse 1 to 2:1, the 7 days and the 7 witnesses. And tonight we're going to be looking at the second section, which is the 7 signs and the 7 feasts, found in chapter 2, verse 1 through chapter 11, verse 57. Many of the commentaries that I've used appropriately state that John builds his gospel around the 7 miraculous signs of Jesus. We've already covered those in this series, and so I'm not going to repeat them. And this is appropriate, but I think we need to give some attention to the fact that along with the 7 miraculous signs, there's also 7 feasts recorded in the second section as well. Now let's look at the 7 feasts. The first feast is found in chapter 2, verses 1 through 11, and that's the wedding in Cana. That's a feast. The second feast is chapter 2, verse 12 to chapter 3, verse 21. That's Passover. This is the first of 3 Passovers. The third feast is an unknown feast, and it's found in chapter 5, verse 1 through 47. The fourth feast is chapter 6, verse 1 through the verse 71. This is the second Passover. And the fifth feast is found in 7:1 through 10, chapter 10, verse 21. I'm getting tongue-tied here. And that's the Feast of Tabernacles. The sixth feast is found in chapter 10, verse 22 through verse 41. This is Hanukkah, which is the Feast of Dedication or the Feast of Lights. The seventh feast is chapter 11, verse 55 through 57. And a little bit beyond there, we'll have some explaining to do as we get there. And that's the third Passover. So this is the third time Passover is mentioned. Now the outline of section 2, which I'm going to present to you, comes from me looking at these 7 feasts along with the literary patterns that I see in the Greek. First of all, in John chapter 2, verse 1, it's kind of like a hinge verse. You can put it in the first section or you can put it in the second section. It kind of bridges like a conjunction. And so we're going to use it in that way. So we're going to use it at the end of the first section and the beginning of the second section. And he goes on to say, on the third day, there was a wedding in the Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. So this verse actually begins with the word and. The Greek word is kai. Kai te hemera te trite. That's on the third day. John uses and quite a bit in his gospel. But what I want you to see here is how and bookends the content. Jonathan's going to put this on the screen for you, but if you look at this, you can't see this in the English, but even those who don't read Greek will be able to see the pattern here. For instance, letter B through F on this chart here all begin with the same Greek word, which is meta, which means after. We don't see this in the English, but you can see it when you look at these together. In letter A, on the third day, kai te hemera. Then we have the first sign in the first feast. Then go to letter B. After this, he went down, meta tauto. Letter C. After these things, notice it's the same in Greek, meta tauta. Even though tautu and tauta are spelled a little different, they're just different nuances of the same word. Then you have letter D. He says meta, that's after day tas. Then letter E, we have meta tauta hain. Then we have in letter F, meta tauta. See how these words are all the same? It's all saying the same thing. After this. Then we have letter G, which starts with kai meta. So we got and meta tauta. So you don't need to remember all the Greek. I just want you to see that there's a pattern here. What I want you to see on this chart is I just want you to see, even though I got into the Greek and it's kind of complicated, what I want you to see is what I'm seeing. You have in letter A, sign 1 and feast 1. Letter B, you have feast number 2. Then you go down to letter D and you see sign number 2. So you have 7 feasts and 7 signs. And boy, they really help us understand when things are happening in the Gospel of John. Not all the feasts are clear, but a lot of them are. And so what we find is that section 1, John 1:1 through 2:1, there's 7 days and 7 witnesses. And what we find in section 2, which runs from chapter 2, verse 1 to chapter 11, verse 54 or 57, there's 7 signs. Jesus performs 7 signs, the 7 signs that writers like to say he built his gospel around, but these take place at 7 feasts. I don't think this is an accident. Now, if these lessons have helped you, please like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, subscribe to our YouTube channel, or check out our live podcast on either Apple or Spotify. Be sure to share this lesson with a friend. I hope to see you next week.